Hey all, welcome to another video, and at the risk of sounding like a broken record, this time I hope to keep it short. I'm hoping to wrap this up in less than 6 minutes. Let's see how we go. Hopefully we'll get it this time. Hopefully I'll get it this time. Okay, so in this video I'll just share a little bit about how to query a DynamoDB table via non-primary key how to query a DynamoDB table by filtering using a non-primary key column. So what that means is, like, how you have like select select star from table name where column name equals so on and so forth, like the condition. So you've got the select statements, and then you talk about like what you want to get. Like star means we want to get data from all the columns, and then you've got the table name, and then you've got the where condition where you specify how do you want to filter the rows selected, filter the data selected. So for example, say you've got a table called todo. So in todo you would have like select star from table name todo where date is greater than something, right? Yeah, so this is basic SQL querying. I'm sure most of us who work in this field would know about this. That's one of the fundamental querying statements. So that's what we have. Like what I was talking about was what we have in a traditional relational database table. Now, DynamoDB by Amazon or AWS is a NoSQL database, and when I was working with it recently, as I was using DynamoDB as a backend for my Node TypeScript CRUD Nodes app, it's the NodeJS Express backend built using TypeScript. So when I was doing the AWS integration with that, I chose to use DynamoDB as the database, and I realized that filtering data, um, selecting the selecting the data from one of the DynamoDB database tables and filtering it by a non-primary key column isn't quite as simple as I first thought. It's not just a matter of putting a where condition. It doesn't quite work like that because this is a NoSQL database. The only way you can query it is using the primary key column. The only way to filter it is using a primary key column after you first created the database. I know this is quite familiar because I worked with Cassandra database sometime last year, and it also has something very similar. Right, now, coming on to DynamoDB, how do we do it? Well, there is a way in which you can do it. So let me talk a little bit about my problem first. So in the Node TypeScript CRUD Nodes backend, I've got a bunch of tables, and the tables are, say, nodes, todo, and user. So this is the backend for a note-taking app where you can add to-dos, and it has user sign in. So these tables that I talked about, like nodes, to-do, and user, they correspond to these entities that I just mentioned. Okay, so the goal is, so for every to-do that we enter in the database, it has a bunch of columns, it has a bunch of data, like it's got like the to-do text, the date, whether or not it's done, and then it also has the user ID. So who is the user that entered that to-do? Right. So my goal was, when the user logs in, I want to fetch all the to-do that have been entered by that user. So I needed to query that to-do column based on the user ID, and the to-do column, in the to-do table, the primary key is the to-do ID, the ID column. So how do I retrieve all the to-do for that particular user? Well, the solution is you create an index, and the index would correspond to the column that you want to query the table by. So when we enter to-do, as I said, one of the pieces of data in that to-do is user ID, because it's for the user that logged in. So the way to retrieve all the to-do from the to-do table for that particular user ID is to create a secondary index called user ID, and then you give it's an arbitrary name. So I named it user ID index, and it also corresponds to the partition key, and then you can configure its read and write capacity. So and you can read more about that in detail on AWS site. So no matter what I say right now wouldn't do it enough justice to completely explain that. So so you create that secondary index, you create an index, the user ID index, and then in your Node.js code, so in my case the Node.js, my Node.js Typescript code, all I need to do is when I'm querying that table, I need to give it a table name. In the parameters, I need to give it a table name and the filter expression. The filter expression will be the column name equals the value, and the expression, and then you ensure that the expression attribute name and the expression attribute values map accordingly, and that's it. You do that and you can get all the to-do from the table entered by that user via that user ID. Okay, if in case all of this is not making a whole lot of sense, that's absolutely okay. I'll put a link to that GitHub repository that I'm talking about in the description of this video, as well as explicitly put a link to the file that has this code. So this is the file is called ddb-todo.ts, and the function starts from line 89. It's an asynchronous function called getToDo by user, and the parameter that it takes in is the user ID, and then it returns a promise of type query output. Have a look at it and let me know if you've got any questions. So again, I'll put a link to these GitHub repositories of mine in the description of this video. You can check it out, and if you like the repository, please give it a star or clone it or fork it, and then if you can help out, that'd be great. Or if you'd like to see something on it, please raise an issue. So to summarize everything, so the problem that we're trying to solve is how to query a DynamoDB database table with a non-primary key in the where clause, and the solution is you create a create an index. You give that index a name, an arbitrary name, like whatever you want it to be, and then you specify the index name in the condition where you specify the condition in your code. So in my case, it's my Node.js repository, and I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. So please check it out. That's all, and let's see how we're doing with time. Oh, 9 minutes. It's a lot longer than I thought it would be, but anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you find this helpful, and until next time, I wish you well and live long and prosper.